It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Welcome in to week one, ladies and gentlemen. They said we couldn't do it. We're doing it. We made it. It's here. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show broadcasting live tonight for the next 2 hours, basically your lead up until the Chiefs and Lions kick off tonight in T-minus 2 hours, whatever it is. Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, broadcasting live from a closet, a storage closet somewhere at Planet Hollywood Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada for the FFPC live events. I was trying to find a place where like my voice wasn't going to be all echoey with the hallways and the ballrooms, and lo and behold, I think it's echoey again. So I apologize for that. We're going to get through this just fine. And the reason we're going to get through this just fine is because of my co-host tonight. You know him from X at Schauf DS. You know all his work at Draft Sharks on X, draftsharks.com. The IDP Wunderkind, it is Matt Schauf. Welcome in, Matt.
You threw me for a second. I was like, X. I'm on X. Oh wait, that's what that is.
I'm getting better at it. Like it used to be like I would say Twitter all the time. I'd put the quarter in the jar every time, and now I'm better at like X. Somebody was calling it. I can't remember who was calling it that you should call it X Twitter because it's basically X Twitter. You know,
yep.
And there's a play on words there. We won't get into it tonight. Matt Schauf is going to be joining me for the next 2 hours tonight. Coming up on the show, we got a lot to get to. We're going to tell you everything going on with the game tonight, as well as week one, to get you set for your lineups, or to get your lineup set for week one, including making sure Travis Kelce is out of all your lineups this week so far. Segment two, we're going to get into the running back report, everything going on with the backfields that you need to know about if you haven't drafted yet, if you're drafting live at Planet Hollywood out here with me, or if you have some drafts coming up yet. Then the second hour, we're going to have to find out where Matt Schauf stands on several different players, including Kenneth Walker, Deebo Samuel, Cole Kmet, and more. And then we're going to take a walk through Matt's FFPC main event draft it's complete, right? That's all done? Okay. So we're going to take a walk through that. And then I also, if there's time, so at some point during the show, a little production meeting on air that we're having here, we're going to get to your FFPC startup dynasty draft that you had just posted as well. I want to get into that as well. That is all coming up on the show tonight. Whew, it's going to be fun. Hey, by the way, in case you are one of those people that have not drafted yet, or if you're looking to add another draft, make sure that you are signing up for your next fantasy football leagues at myffpc.com. A $1 million grand prize in the FFPC main event is at stake. A $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship at stake. Remember, both of those have roughly a $6 million prize pool. And quite frankly, a lot of other stuff is sold out. Terminator, Super Bracket, a lot of the other stuff. The Best Ball Tournament, obviously. Superflex Best Ball Tournament, Superflex Best Ball Tournament 2. Like, the main event and the Fantasy Pro Championship is what you want to get into right now. We'll have Dynasty startups going all the way up until Saturday night as well. And I feel like I can break this news right now. Nobody else knows this yet. They haven't been posted yet. We're going to have Sunday morning drafts over at myffpc.com before the games kick off. So make sure that you are registering for those. Yours truly will be commissioning those. I always love spending my Sunday mornings like that. So that is what's going on at myffpc.com. Remember, 1,500 plus dynasty leagues over the course of over a decade, and none have ever folded. Shout out to our producer, the man behind the glass tonight, Anthony Rivera. Okay, Travis Kelce, Matt, here we go. He is officially out for the game tonight. We found that out roughly an hour or so ago. Jordan Schultz is the one who reported that news. Kelce sounds like he could be back for week two. What I think is fascinating, and we'll get into the Noah Gray aspect of this, Matt, but for people who haven't drafted yet, Travis Kelce, I was telling people I have no problem with you taking him at the 101 in a tight end premium draft for sure. And now I see the drafts that I was just facilitating and proxy drafting today for other high stakes players. I'm looking at him like, I can't believe how far this guy's tumbling. If you are in a tight end premium draft that is either going off tonight, Saturday, or Sunday morning, where would you feel comfortable taking Kelce? And can you tell us a little bit about those people that do have Noah Gray, or if they picked up Noah Gray, how you feel about him against the Lions tonight?
Comfortable is a tough word because I don't think there's a spot where you can really feel awesome about it, but that they were testing him to see if he could play in tonight's game makes me want to believe that it's not going to be a long-term thing. I think that if he got to me at the 1-2 turn, I saw my pal Adam Krautwurst take him at 12 in FFPC draft. I think if he got to me there, I would probably pull the trigger, but that's also one of those things where I'm never really sure until I'm on the clock, and it probably depends some on who else makes it to me. But, at that point, and if he does miss one game, there's enough time for you to still insure him with some other quality tight ends and get those points in week 1 and then hope for him to be back in week 2.
How do you feel about Noah Gray as a spot start tonight? I think about too the FFPC. You have those 2 flexes, right? And with tight end premium scoring, would Noah Gray make it in as a second flex for you against who I still think is a really bad defense in Detroit?
I don't think that I would play him unless I was in a very deep league. I think Blake Bell will also see some time. And we saw last year, the Chiefs just spread the ball around now. I mean, with Travis Kelce in there, they had all these other receivers. Nobody was ever the guy at wideout. So I think that's what we're going to see tonight is them just spreading the ball to everybody. Maybe somebody steps up and has a night, but I kind of doubt that it's going to be Noah Gray. I don't see the path where I regret not playing Noah Gray.
Okay, so, and that's fine, and I get that. Now, if it's not going to be Noah Gray, let's talk about 2 other guys. Number 1, the Better Boss already chiming in on the YouTube chat tonight. He's saying he's all over Richie James tonight. So that's one guy. Let's talk about Richie James and the fact that he's going to be out there and Kelce is not. Let's also talk about Kadarius Toney, who, Saints be praised, or Chiefs be praised, I guess in this case, is not on the official injury report tonight, and he's active. So he's going to be going. If the value tonight does not lie in Noah Gray, who is the Chief that you want to make sure, or Chiefs that you want to get in your lineup?
Sky Moore is the one I want to make sure is in my lineup. He's my top bet for scoring among those guys tonight. I think the backfield's a solid bet. I want to see about Jerick McKinnon's receiving usage. I think it probably helps him to have Kelce be out. There's not really a must for me otherwise. I know that people are excited about Kadarius Toney, but the guy has had 2 knee surgeries since the last time he actually played an NFL game. So I would prefer to watch him play a game before watching him play in my lineup. If I had to choose another Chiefs receiver, I'm going to play Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I mean, he's healthy. He's in the lineup. He's still a starter. I know that he's volatile. We all know he's volatile, but the other side of volatility is the good side, and he is playing with Patrick Mahomes. So I guess I'll take the healthy guy who's been a starter all offseason and that I can trust to be on the field tonight.
How do you handle players like, not necessarily for tonight, but guys like Rashee Rice and Justin Ross, 2 players that Andy Reid singled out as maybe not big contributors at the start of the season, but at the end of the season, when all the money is being awarded in the FFPC, these guys could be the go-tos or the big-time playmakers for the Chiefs. I know you're probably going to have them on your bench tonight. Are you going to try to roster them for the entire season for those money weeks and see if it does pay off?
Probably not, because I don't have any reason to believe that those guys are going to work clearly past the others that are already on the team. I don't believe that either of those players is, more of an elite talent than anybody that they would be passing. Rashee Rice had not as good a college career as Sky Moore. They were both round 2 picks. Justin Ross, I at this point, I just kind of have to see it with Justin Ross. I love hearing all the positive stuff. I hope that he has an excellent season, but given the path that he took to get here, I've got to see him do it before I am betting on him in a fantasy lineup, or even, chasing him, hoping for big things late in the season. Because it was a year ago that we were hearing some buzz along those lines with Justin Watson, who, was like a low-key testing favorite for people who track combine stuff. So anybody that's a pass catcher in Kansas City has a moment where people are excited about him. So I try to temper that excitement, look at last year, realize that nobody besides Travis Kelce was actually elite, and then just keep it under control from there.
I think that's the narrative that nobody really talks about, is we're always chasing the greatness of these Chiefs pass catchers, or because of the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, we're chasing these Chiefs pass catchers. And if your name's not Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill a couple of years ago, it's just not there. And I often wondered, and there's probably positions like this, position groups around the NFL where it's just, you're better off staying away. Like the Colts running back situation, which I think we'll get into later on. That's another situation where it's just okay, there might be an opportunity there, trying to squeeze some fantasy goodness and figure out where that opportunity is. Might be a fool's errand. Hey, Kenny Stay Trill in the YouTube chat right now. He has a starter sick question. The first starter sick question of the year. God, what a time to be alive. It's full PPR. He has to pick one of these guys. He's looking at either Drake London, he's looking at Raheem Mostert, and he's looking at Isaiah Pacheco. He can only play one of those guys. Full PPR, Matt, here, anytime it's full PPR and if there's an elite number one receiver, I usually lean that way. I guess Drake London's not an elite receiver, but he's good enough for me to say I'm going to play him over Pacheco and Mostert.
Yeah, and I don't have our week one rankings memorized just yet, so London is probably the top PPR option there. I would have a hard time not playing Raheem Mostert in a high upside matchup as the backfield leader for the Dolphins, but I think it's close to a coin flip between those since we don't know just how much work Mostert will get, and we don't know just how much target share or target volume, really, more than share, because we know he'll get the share, but the target volume for Drake London is the question. So I think both of those guys are good plays, and they're both easily ahead of Pacheco for me here.
Okay, all right. I think the other thing that I want to get into here is and we're going to listen, if you've got start sits and you want to lay it on me and Matt, for sure, plunk them out. But we still have drafts going on here at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas, and I do want to answer some draft questions. And quite frankly, Matt, there might not be a bigger one than Cooper Kupp right now. Adam Schefter yesterday said that Kupp is already ruled out for week one. Apparently, he had a setback in rehabbing his hamstring. This was last week. Sean McVay said that there's still a possibility, there's a non-zero chance that he could be placed on IR. I think, and I'll tell you, okay, so the two drafts I proxied for, basically what I'm doing out here is we have these high stakes leagues, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 buy-ins. We usually have about half the people drafting online and half the people drafting live. It's almost everybody is live for the main event, all our other live events, but there are some of the higher end stuff where I proxy for. And so I sat in on two. There was a $3,000 varsity. Cooper Kupp fell to the early 8th round in that draft. And then in the $10,000 high society that I literally got done with right before the show, he went in the mid 4th round. It is such a wide expanse of where people are taking them. And I understand the risk. You know, you definitely want to make sure that you are not setting yourself up for failure by taking Kupp too early. But is there a sweet spot for you, knowing what we know, and perhaps maybe more importantly, what we don't know about Cooper Kupp's rehab right now? Where would you be comfortable taking him this weekend?
There's definitely not a sweet spot. I think the range you just talked about shows it's all about risk tolerance. There's no spot where you say this is where he pays off, because what if he misses half the season like Keenan Allen did with the recurring hamstring thing last year? And then what if he misses a game or two? So none of us knows what it is. The fact that they haven't put him on IR yet, gives us hope that he misses less than 4 games, but it doesn't mean that he necessarily will miss less than 4 games. So I think that round 3, round 4 range is probably where I would go ahead and take a shot. I think the more money I had on the line as a buy-in fee, probably the later I'm waiting and the more nervous I get before I click that name.
Let's do this. So Cooper Kupp, by the way, shout out to Fantasy Mojo, Darren Armani, fantasymojo.com has all this great FFPC data. Make sure you're subscribing there if you're playing the FFPC. Over the last 2 days in our main event, which we're still taking registrations for right now, Cooper Kupp had an ADP of the 212. Highest he went was 109. The latest he went was 403. Now, I just told you he went in the 8th round today, so it's still a wide variety. Let me throw a few players out at you. You tell me which one you'd rather draft. Cooper Kupp or DJ Moore?
Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel?
Deebo.
Cooper Kupp or DK Metcalf?
Ooh, Metcalf.
All right.
That's probably the line right there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, just one more. Cooper Kupp, actually 2 more. Cooper Kupp or Amari Cooper? Battle of the Coopers.
I'm taking a shot on Kupp there.
And then final one, Cooper Kupp or Christian Watson, who's got a hamstring injury of his own, by the way.
Kupp for sure. And I should say, too, that I think it matters what I took with my first couple of picks. If I get to round 3 with 2 wideouts already rostered and he's my 3rd, it's a little bit easier to take a shot instead of just taking a running back that's probably not giving me an advantage over the rest of the group there. That's
a great point. Matt Schauf joining us here tonight from Draft Sharks, on loan from draftsharks.com, hanging out with us until 9 o'clock tonight when I'm sure many of you will be watching the game. By the way, don't forget, and I'm going to tell you about BetterCast coming up, because we got a BetterCast going on right now for the game. You can actually play BetterCast tonight during the Lions and Chiefs NFL kickoff. You can predict what's going to happen in the game, score points, win prizes. You can chat with the community in real time, watch a game, play our free contest, win prizes. Download the BetterCast app in the Apple App Store and Google Play. Let's move on and talk a little bit about who's the next guy I wanted to bring up. Oh, another receiver that's dealing with an injury. It's turf toe Terry McLaurin. Limited in practice. I believe, Matt, did you see the practice reports today? I think he was limited again today.
Full today.
Oh, full. Oh, okay.
I haven't seen the official one, but the report, before the officials came out, said he was back to full today.
Okay, so that's very good to hear, because when I heard the turf toe thing, I just assumed this is a multi-week injury. Can't count on him. And by the way, too, and I think I brought this up on the show a few weeks ago, Jahan Dotson was already moving up the draft boards, and McLaurin was falling a little bit. And I said, wouldn't surprise me at all to see these guys flip-flop by the time we got to Las Vegas for the FFPC live events. And then McLaurin got hurt. And I'm like, okay, well, now we'll never know what would have happened had McLaurin not gone down. Right now, Jahan Dotson is ahead of McLaurin. Wide receiver 29 at the 606. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 32 at the 609. So they're not very far apart. Matt Schauf, who would you rather have this year, Dotson or McLaurin?
I'd lean toward McLaurin because it sounds like the toe is not an issue. We've already seen him succeed in the NFL. I would not be shocked if Dotson outperforms him, but I think, when it's close like that, you got to lean toward the guy who has already produced in the pros. And not that Dotson hasn't. He produced in limited time last year, just not to the degree McLaurin has.
Is that the difference for you, though, is just the fact that you've seen McLaurin do it longer than Dotson? Because I feel like if Dotson does break out this year, and he was kind of breaking out a little bit towards the end of last season, but if he does break out this year, I mean, he could be just normally drafted over McLaurin. And I don't know what the contract situation is like for McLaurin, but I mean, he could be the number one receiver for Washington next year. I guess the other wrinkle that we need to throw into this too is Sam Howell, fresh quarterback. Like what to expect from him? Matt, is there fantasy goodness that we can squeeze out of both McLaurin and Dotson this year if Sam Howell is the quarterback?
It's definitely possible. And I think neither of them is going so high that you have to worry about the situation. They're typically outside of the top 24, even before this. I guess McLaurin was right around wide receiver 24, 25 before the toe injury. But they're in that low wide receiver 3 range where you're not giving up too much to take a shot. One of them's probably going to outscore the other, maybe not by a huge margin. Sam Howell, I was shocked that he lasted until round 5 last year in such a quarterback hungry league. He started his entire time at North Carolina, looked good, has a good arm, which we've seen in the preseason here, can also run. So he is interesting for fantasy and interesting for those receivers. I agree that I think it's possible that by next year, Dotson is ahead of Terry McLaurin. To this point, though, there's not one thing that makes Dotson look like the better player than McLaurin. He was drafted earlier, first round versus third round, but McLaurin's made up for that by producing so far in the NFL. And otherwise, McLaurin's bigger, he's faster. So if it were something like Dotson was an elite prospect and just didn't match McLaurin last year, or he was like 6th, if he was Julio Jones and joining a team where McLaurin had already produced more, then I'd be like, all right, I'm going to take the younger guy. But in this case, I got to give the edge to the veteran.
And I was just playing this back in my head. Didn't McLaurin sign a big extension like a year or so ago? So it's like the Commanders obviously love him, and it's not like he's going to be leaving anytime soon. Sam Howell, what's your ownership like on him this year? Did you grab him in any leagues as your second or third quarterback? I think about best ball too. He'd be a good best ball guy.
Yeah, it's fairly low. I made sure to get some in best ball. I held back early because I wasn't sure that we were going to see him start because of how much money they gave Jacoby Brissett as a backup. The money there, and especially letting Taylor Heineke walk and then signing Jacoby Brissett for more money this year than Taylor Heineke's getting, I believe, indicated to me that not only did they want insurance, but maybe he starts this year. So I was hesitant early. I made sure to get some late. It's really just a best ball thing, but he's also in this range where like Jordan Love's there, Kenny Pickett's there, Bryce Young is somebody that I've drafted quite a bit, even after Sam Howell's going. So it's a bit more spreading it around that area as opposed to being big time in or out on Howell. And I guess by the time you get to him on the board, I was like, I don't know, how sure am I that this 5th round guy in his first starting turn is going to spend all year starting? So at that stage, I didn't lean him overly.
By the way, everything that we're talking about tonight, getting you set for week 1, has been curated by yours truly via the Shark Bites at draftsharks.com. That's where I get all my information as far as where I need to go to find out the latest in the NFL, especially coming up on week 1 tonight. One of my favorite websites to visit, draftsharks.com. And oh, by the way, Matt Schauf actually works for it. Just so everybody's aware. Jackson Smith-Njigba, what a journey it has been for him over the last few weeks. Guy that was picked high in the draft. A lot of people are believers that he was going to be a difference maker right away as a rookie. Gets drafted by Seattle behind Lockett and Metcalf, and I still see him go high in drafts. In fact, I saw in a lot of drafts today where he went off the board, there was some shoulders that shrunk. There was some visible size. There was some tossing of pens. Like, there were people upset when Smith-Njigba went off the board and they didn't get him. Pete Carroll said yesterday that Smith-Njigba is going to play against the Los Angeles Rams 2 weeks removed from wrist surgery, and he's going to be playing. Apparently, Smith-Njigba hasn't talked about it. He's got no hesitation. I think that I would have some hesitation using him right away, given that he is the third receiver on that team. The fact that we have no buys this week, there aren't any major, issues at receiver, unless perhaps you have Cooper Kupp or somebody like that. But Smith-Njigba, the fact that he's playing week 1, even in a dual flex, Matt, are you looking elsewhere?
I am. I mean, I'm very interested now to see how this is going to play out. I have not been a buyer on him just because the price has been so high all along. He was way ahead of the other rookies heading into the draft. It didn't really drop from there, even though he was drafted right with the other 3 first-round rookie wideouts and to a spot that's already got 2 really good receivers starting. So I don't know what to expect from him. There are a lot of people that I respect that are excited about him and think that there's a real possibility that he is their top receiver by some point this season. I have a hard time believing that he comes in and passes DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett right away. So overall, I'm fading JSN to some degree, but I feel a little bit less comfortable about it now than I did in, say, June.
I think what's wild to me, and maybe this is just the obvious thing, like, rather than trying to figure out when to take Metcalf and when to take Lockett, well, I always take Lockett because I think he's undervalued every single year. But rather than trying to, figure out which Seahawks receiver I should be getting, maybe the plan is just like, don't stress about it and just grab Geno Smith as your backup quarterback. This should be a banner year. In fact, I was actually, I'll tell you this quick story. I was actually for my terrestrial radio gig in Wisconsin, we had an NFL draft party for the Packers, and one of the in my building, there's 6 radio stations there, and one of the FM guys was talking all sorts of sauce about how great Geno Smith was going to be this year after they drafted Smith-Njigba, and I get that. But then he's like, we got to make a bet, and so I am going to owe him a boatload of cash if Geno Smith wins the MVP this year, because I gave him some pretty sweet odds. Yeah, that's what it came down. He's like, this is a great buying opportunity. You gotta be betting Geno Smith right now before the markets change. Which I guess there's something to be said for that, but the markets didn't change that much. But Geno Smith this year, I really like this guy. In fact, I have him on. There are so many teams where I waited on quarterback, Matt, and ended up with a Kirk Cousins Geno Smith pairing, and I really like that pairing this year.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he finished QB8 in points per game last year, and then they added Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's apparently already better than Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So, I mean, how bad could Geno Smith be this year?
Exactly. It's going to be great. And by the way, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet on that team too. That Seattle offense, man, that's one I'd be looking at hard. And I know a lot of people have been bumping them up in drafts this weekend for sure. Let's talk a little bit about another offense, this time in the AFC, that a lot of people have been trying to get a piece of, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I think the polarizing thing here is this Josh Palmer versus Quentin Johnston discussion. Daniel Popper, who covers the Chargers for The Athletic, said that Palmer appears to be ahead of Johnston on the depth chart right now. Palmer has been getting more first-team reps in the 3 wide receiver packages with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Johnston is still developing. He's had problems with drops, whatever. But I feel like, and I have to go back and look at the article again. When I read this, Matt, Popper was really couching this as like using phrases like right now or at the start of the season. In other words, he believes the transition is going to happen at some point. Now, whether that's early, middle, or late, we don't know yet. But your thoughts on Palmer versus Quentin Johnston right now are, I don't think people are overdrafting Palmer, but are people letting Quentin Johnston slip too far in drafts? And I'll give you the ADP on him right now in the FFPC main event over the last 2 days. You're looking at Quentin Johnston as wide receiver 48 at the end of the 9th round.
Yeah, yes, they are. And I don't care at all that Josh Palmer is opening the season ahead of him. You talked about drops. You know who else we heard about having trouble with drops over the summer was Jamar Chase. You know who else was not in the starting lineup in week 1 of his rookie season? Justin Jefferson. Now, I'm not saying that Quentin Johnston is Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. He did go in the same area of the draft as Jefferson, certainly not the same as Chase. But all you need is examples like that to, point you toward how it doesn't really matter that he's not the 3rd receiver instead of the 4th receiver to open his first season with the Chargers. I'm not drafting Quentin Johnston because I want to start him in week 1. They've got Mike Williams. They've got Keenan Allen. I'm not expecting big week 1 numbers. I'm drafting Quentin Johnston because later in the season, when he's had more time to get into it, and once Keenan Allen or Mike Williams gets hurt, then I'm getting that target share, and then he's lighting it up downfield. Because before all this, that was what was coming out of Chargers camp. It was like, this guy makes plays downfield all the time. We're getting the videos of him that catching it with his hands, reaching out and catching it away from his body. And that's after the knock on him was that he was a body catcher. So I'm buying. I mean, the NFL told us with the way it was picked, and it's just the team that picked those players. Maybe it's not anybody else, but the 4 wide receivers went right next to each other in round 1. So I don't think there's any reason to believe there's separation, but if you look at ADP, it says there's separation and Quentin Johnston's trailing. So buy the one that's trailing.
Yeah, that's my next question here, because you look at those 4 wide receivers, Addison, Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, all going between wide receiver 33 and 37. They're all pretty tightly bunched from the mid 7th to the end of the 8th. Then you got to wait till the end of the 9th to draft Quentin Johnston. If you were ranking these guys in a vacuum, Matt, let's just say they all have the same ADP, how would you rank them?
I'm taking Zay Flowers first because he's the one who has the path to being his team's top wideout without anybody getting hurt or, anything surprising happening. And after that, I mean, it's kind of just even. I'm just waiting and taking the one that falls. And I mean, if you look at Quentin Johnston versus JSN, there's tougher competition for JSN for targets in Seattle than there is for Quentin Johnston. And I'm not saying that necessarily Metcalf and Lockett are better than Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but we watched Keenan Allen miss half the season with hamstring issues last year. We've watched Mike Williams lose lots of time to injury over several seasons and not be the target hog at any point that either Metcalf or Lockett has been. So, I'm not saying Quentin Johnston definitely leads this class, but I think that his challenges are being overblown a little bit.
I think the question that comes to mind when you say about Quentin Johnston, you're picking him up for the end of the season. In like the FFPC main event, 12 teams, 20 rounds, start 10 players, including 2 flexes. Could you be all right starting Quentin Johnston if Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both healthy? Is there value to be starting him at that point? Or do you need an injury or like a suspension or whatever for either Allen or Williams to be missing from the lineup in order to feel good about starting Quentin Johnston?
As of right now, I would say I probably need one or, at least one of those guys to be out. But later in the season, I wouldn't be surprised if that number 3 spot is able to put up numbers where I'm considering using him, because I do think that this offense is going to be electric. I think they're going to lean pass heavily, which they were already doing before getting Kellen Moore. And I just think that it's one of the few offenses that could support a third worthwhile receiver, especially somebody who makes his plays downfield, which just means more efficient scoring on what you do get. So I do think there's a chance that I would be willing to use Quentin Johnston in a lineup, even if Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both still on the field.
Hopefully Justin Herbert, remember the old Roger Clemens arm strengthening thing where he's jamming his arm into a big barrel of rice over and over again? I hope Herbert's doing that, because Kellen Moore is going to make that guy's arm fall off this year. It's going to be great. Can't wait to see it. I mean, not the gruesome part, but just
can't wait for his arm to fall off.
I don't want to see that. No, I'm not going to root for injuries or amputations on the field. Let's go to the YouTube chat real quick. Joe King, bulky beard, looking epic tonight. Thank you so much. It's been oiled. I've had the balm in it, and I trimmed it up on the sides just for you, Joe. Glad to see you like it. And then it's Zuri, beside myself. Pacheco tonight or D-Hop as a flex. I don't know if this is half PPR standard or full PPR. I think, kind of what you were saying with Pacheco before the last question we had with Kenny Stay Trill, what you said, Matt, I think I'm going to go. I mean, Hopkins is going to be a target hog in that offense. And I know it's low volume. It's probably going to be low volume. But, man, I feel better about Hopkins than Pacheco.
Yeah, I would have to lean toward Hopkins, assuming it's PPR. I think half PPR, it's close. And then if it's non-PPR, I would take Pacheco.
Then it's Pacheco, yeah. I think you're right, and good luck to you on that, Zuri. In fact, we're going to have more, not necessarily Pacheco conversation, but more running back conversation when we come back. The running back report is up next. I'll tease you a little bit to tell you, obviously, Jonathan Taylor is a weekly staple on this segment for the last 2 months or whatever. But we're also going to talk a little bit about Rachaad White. We're going to talk about the Dolphins and the Cowboys' backup running backs. Yeah, spicy. I know. It's going to be great. Matt Schauf from Draft Sharks. Follow him on Twitter or X, quarter in the jar. Follow him on X at SchaufDS. DraftSharks.com is where to check out all his work. I'm Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, live from Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC live events. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this on the Better Sports Network.
Matt Deutsch here, live at the Scott Fish Bowl 13 New York City Draft at Tito Murphy's. The first round of the Shake Shack division is underway. If you could believe it, team number one, you're going to love this, Mike Lipchenko selects Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback, Miami Dolphins in the 101. An unbelievable, surprising pick here in the 4th spot. From the game day, Scott the King Engel. How does he start his draft? Not with a Seattle Seahawk, but the Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen will lead Scott Engel's team. He's right here. King, what do you think about Josh Allen to start your team?
I didn't think he was actually going to fall to me. The Tua Tagovailoa pick was off the board. Mike said he was going to pivot, so it was just a matter of who's going to fall to me. I just always think about, okay, who's the top guy on my board, who's going to fall to me. But having Josh Allen at 4 proves that every draft has a different flow and you never know what's going to happen.
Bobby Cable's here. Tell us about the Scott Fish Bowl charity personally touched your family.
So basically, when I joined the military, when you get called up, you don't necessarily get money right away. It takes 30 days for any money to hit your account. And what I'm telling you is that if it wasn't for people like Scott Fish Bowl and Toys for Tots, my family wouldn't have had a Christmas. So stuff like this, I'll Hulk smash somebody for, because without it, my family would legitly not have a Christmas because of it.
Scott Fish Bowl at fancycares.org, of course, Break the Hold. Amazing job for everybody to come out here. And look what we've given ourselves here. A whole Saturday at a New York City bar to ourselves. No family, no job. Some of us working. But really, fantasy football party here with the best people in New York City together. So congratulations to everybody.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
The FFPC is the home of season-long fantasy football featuring 2 separate $1 million grand prizes in the FFPC main event, as well as the Fantasy Pros Championship. Best ball leagues are still going on through Saturday night. Dynasty leagues are going on through Saturday night. Terminator tournament is sold out, as well as the Super Bracket. So you missed out on that this year. Get in those next year. And then, of course, the FFPC Weekly Challenge starting up shortly. Use the promo code ALARM at myffpc.com for an exclusive offer. Get $25 off your first FFPC entry, $35 or more. Go to myffpc.com and use promo code ALARM. Matt, have you ever done a Sunday morning draft of week 1 in your life?
Have I done? Yes, actually.
You have not, really? When was this?
Not a full season draft. No, I was just trying to think about it real quickly. It was just daily drafts. Now that I think about it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know anybody. Like, I know people because I'll commission them on the FFPC's website, but I don't know anybody personally who's ever done one. By the way, Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com. DraftSharks.com, at DraftSharks on X, at SchaufDS on X. How many IDP leagues do you play in specifically? You're always touting them. How many are you in?
Every time I get this question, I have to stop and count things. It's not a large number of them, and I've actually shed some leagues this offseason, but I added one tournament best ball IDP that's only IDP, so I'm looking forward to the results of that one. I guess the best answer is not as many as I would like to, because there just aren't enough offerings.
And I don't want to fall down the IDP hole with you, but I feel like I should. One of the things I always thought was interesting, and this is a horribly dated reference, but Darrelle Revis, one of the best defensive players out there. You didn't want to draft him though, did you? Because he never got thrown to. You want these corners, like I think about, and I don't know if he's any good in IDP, but I think about a guy like Rasul Douglas in Green Bay, who's always taking chances. Like, if he gets burned, it doesn't really hurt you. But if he doesn't get burned and he makes the play, that's huge. It's kind of, you're not necessarily picking the best guys. You want to pick the kind of the next best guys. Is that a strategy, or am I reading too much into it?
It depends on the position. I mean, cornerback's really the spot where you don't want the absolute elites, because those guys are being avoided by offenses and they just don't have chances to put up numbers. But otherwise, it's a bit of it's one of those things that people think is true. And it can be true at times, but we see some of that on offense too, where a guy is not awesome, but he's in a spot where he just catches 8 balls for 70 yards every week. So I don't think it's all that different. You still want usually the best players, and the top picks are good players in good situations.
Let's go to the running back report right now and talk a little bit about Christian McCaffrey here. Dan Graziano from ESPN reported, I think it was earlier this week, that the Niners are going to take Christian McCaffrey off the field more than the Panthers did. And I can't, I mean, I think it was a Niners coach or maybe it was a Niners beat writer, Graziano himself, talked about this could be an epic 1,000-yard season. And I'm scratching my head, how does this work if he's going to be playing less, but he's putting up better numbers? Where's the disconnect in here? How are you handling McCaffrey, especially if you have an early first-round pick?
Well, first of all, I think it was Graziano. I don't remember for sure that he was the one that said he could go for 1,000 and 1,000, even though he's going to get less. He's fewer touches on offense, which doesn't make sense, and shows you why a writer should not be projecting stats. The answer actually came out on draftsharks.com earlier this year, because I wrote the early round bust article. And now that the season's starting, I'll go ahead and reveal that it was Christian McCaffrey.
How about that? On the air tonight, I technically, there's still people drafting beyond that room. That's right. Beyond this closet that I'm in right now. People are drafting. They're watching this. So the early round bust, first round bust, Christian McCaffrey this year. Matt, enlighten us on why he is Draft Sharks first round bust.
This is the first reason, what we're talking about right here, because the Niners, for the first time in his career, have reason to not overwork him. The reason that Christian McCaffrey was so dominant in Carolina was because he was the offense. He was the leading receiver and the leading running back. He got a ton of touches, and he delivered with them. We already saw him in San Francisco get fewer touches than what he got in Carolina. He had his fewest reception. He had fewer receptions per game last year for the Niners than he did for the Panthers. He had fewer touches when Elijah Mitchell was on the field. He had fewer touches when Deebo Samuel was on the field. They just have a lot of guys to give the ball to, and they have every reason to lighten his load a bit. And I'm not saying that that's going to make Christian McCaffrey stink, but if we need to take a guy in the first half of round 1, we need a dominant running back, especially a running back, because he's one of the few running backs up there. He has to be a whole lot different than the running backs that we can get in round 2. And I just think that the work he's going to get is not a whole lot different than what Tony Pollard's going to get, and not enough different versus the other guys behind them. And then there is that bit of injury risk. We have the injury predictor on Draft Sharks, and it does show he's not atop the position in injury risk, and Austin Eckler is up there as well, but it is above an 80% chance that he misses some time. We have him projected to miss 2.2 games for the season. So it's just, when you get more touches, I guess if he beats that first concern of ours and does get more touches than we're expecting, what he also does is increase the chance that he gets hurt, because that's just a fact. The more you touch the ball, the more likely you are to get hurt. So just when you combine all of that with the price of where you have to take him in the first half of round 1, amid this, land of high target wide receivers, there's bust potential to him.
The 49ers this year, by the way, go to draftsharks.com to check out that first round bust. Is it first round or early round bust? I want to
early round bust.
Early round bust.
Honestly, it's gotten tougher to rate. The article started out back when people just made stupid decisions. And my boss Lenny is like, all right, I'm going to point out that this is stupid so that people don't make it if they're reading my article. people are getting sharper now with drafting. So you have to find things like Christian McCaffrey's going to get a little bit less work. And if he gets hurt, then he's a total bust.
So check that out. The early round bust article produced by Matt Schauf over at draftsharks.com. 49ers ADP, McCaffrey, 104, Deebo Samuel, 312, and then back-to-back at the end of the 5th round, 5'11 and 5'12, George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. Those are where those Niners skill position guys are going over the last 2 days in the FFPC main event. Besides McCaffrey, do you see any of those other guys busting out at that spot? And that's a lot of draft capital for one team.
Yeah, I like Deebo this year. He has sunk back down the rankings a little bit. I was off him last year. He was actually our bust last year because he was pushed too high up in the draft rankings. He's back down a little bit. I'm buying into him being in better shape after being disappointed with his effort last year. And he's going, midway through wide receiver 2 territory. So it's a little bit less risk. And I like that he is unique at the position in that he has a path to more touches, even if the target share isn't dominant. And even if he's not delivering quite as many yards per catch as he was first half of that breakout season a couple years ago. George Kittle going a little bit too early for me. His production last year was based primarily on a very high touchdown rate that I do not expect to repeat. And he's also a high injury risk at a position that does not have very many guys that actually are high injury risks. And we're already seeing that. He's already dealing with something heading into the season. Brandon Ayuk, I don't know what to make of him. I don't want to be out on him, but I can't be fully in. Primarily for that available opportunities question that I had with McCaffrey. He's not quite going late enough where I can ignore the opportunity share, and yet he's going late enough where I can't say I'm totally fading Brandon Ayuk. Because what if he is better than Deebo? We talked about Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. What if Brandon Ayuk becomes a better player than Deebo Samuel? That's possible, at least on the receiving front. So I would say I'm a little bit ambivalent on Ayuk, a little bit scared to be totally out, but also not buying in, not buying much George Kittle, and most interested in Deebo.
To echo what you said about Ayuk, it's hard for me to think up reasons I don't like him other than the fact that it seems like everybody thinks that. And I'm noticing him rise up draft boards, right? And now he's probably at a spot. I mean, I think I saw him go in our 10K buy-in high society league. He went at like the end of the 4th round. And then it's like at that point, okay, well, somebody wants to take him there. I'll let him have him there and figure it out later on. Okay, I want to get back to the running backs here. I blabber and somehow we get on Kittle and Ayuk.
Good topic.
It's what I do. It is a good topic for sure. You're right. Okay, let's talk about, let's see here. Rachaad White, the fantastic back in Tampa, according to Dave Canales, the offense coordinator for Tampa. He also said there's a bunch of good backs behind him. I want to start with Rachaad White, but I want to get into Sean Tucker a little bit with you as well. White is a guy that I was kind of on last year. It always seems like these running backs that don't have the first round pedigree, it seems like the second year is really the year you want to take them. They kind of make their way and stumble through year one, and maybe there's some fantasy value. But Rachaad White's a perfect example of a guy that should break out this year. We've heard nothing but good things. They didn't go out and invest heavy draft capital or free agency dollars into the position. And White is catching more passes, or he's going to be catching more passes, so we've been told so far this year. So Canales said that he's a fantastic back. Tucker, Vaughn, Edmonds are just a bunch of good backs. Canales also said, I think there's more to learn about just how we use Rachaad on 3rd down, which, message like this is a pass catcher this year for sure. And if you look at the ADP again, in the FFPC main event, I'm going to use over the last 2 days, he's creeped up a little bit, but not a ton. You can still get White as running back 22 at the 604. Matt, I think there's a lot to like here. I think we're picking at nits if we're finding reasons not to draft him. How are you handling White?
He's going almost at a no risk level. Even if he busts from RB22, what'd you lose? A low end RB2. You have insurance on your roster. If you draft an RB22 and you don't have other options, then you didn't draft very well. And first of all, if I were him, I would be wearing a t-shirt right now that says fantastic back on it. And I disagree with the second part of that there are other good backs behind him. We'll see about Sean Tucker. We haven't had a chance to see him in the NFL. I wish we could have known where he would have gotten drafted if he didn't have the heart issue. because that would tell us a little bit more about what to expect. But he's probably the second best running back there because nobody else is any good. Keyshawn Vaughn's not good. He showed us that. Chase Edmonds is not good. He showed us that. 2 teams tried him last year and gave up on him. So it has to be Rachaad White. And that's really the greatest allure to him. I liked him as a prospect, especially the receiving stuff. He did work into a backfield that Leonard Fournette started the season controlling. He was very inefficient. So, maybe that's him. If that continues to be him, that'll be an issue at some point. But right now, he has the path in front of him to just hog opportunity share and score by virtue of default. I mean, because there's nobody to take the ball away from him. I think one big thing holding his ADP down is that nobody likes Baker Mayfield and everybody thinks the Bucs are going to be terrible this year. So, great. If that makes it easier to draft Rachaad White, I love getting him when there's not a whole lot of risk tied to it. And even if they do stink, even if they're trailing all the time, even if they're throwing the ball a lot, I think Rachaad White's going to be heavily involved in that.
What do you think about if Rachaad White, like if let's say Brady didn't retire and he was still on this team this year. So you have Brady at quarterback, Godwin, Evans, and then White at running back. I mean, that's probably a 2-round jump in ADP, right? For White up to the 4th round.
He's probably duking it out with Alexander Madison, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think he'd be ahead of Madison. For sure if Brady was back. Now we're living in the Matrix. Let's talk about J.C. Allen's report that Sean Tucker is actually going to open the season as the backup to White. To me, this is perfect because Edmonds is an easy drop now. I was never interested in Keyshawn Vaughn. It's nice to know that the Buccaneers aren't necessarily that interested in Keyshawn Vaughn either. But Sean Tucker, early 15th round, I don't think he's necessarily a target in a conventional sense, Matt. But if I'm looking for an injury away type guy, Tucker could be the type of player that if White goes down, that he should get the lion's share of the carries here and really the touches too.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a why not pick. He did catch the ball in college as well. I wish that we could know if he would have been a 3rd or 4th round pick without the heart issue, because maybe he would have entered the NFL at about the same level as Rachaad White did in terms of draft capital. So, all we have to go on here is a guy who did flash in college. He was, one of those inconsistent runners where he'll boom one and then there's a lot more that don't gain a whole lot. He might end up being a little bit closer to Chuba Hubbard than we want him to be. But it's similar to Rachaad White. There's opportunity there. I like you said, he's not quite a target, but he's definitely a why not player back in that range. I actually had the decision whether to put him on a team that I already had Rachaad White. I believe my main event team, I have Rachaad White, and then had the decision to make on Sean Tucker. And I decided not to handcuff him because I don't know what they'll do with those other backs. If Rachaad White were to go down, I think they would probably involve Chase Edmonds and or Keyshawn Vaughn to some degree, to at least the degree where it's not somebody controlling the backfield. And Tyjae Spears was still there. So I figured my bet
not
here is
Tyjae
that
Spears. Are you talking about just in drafts?
Yeah, in my particular draft. So I took Tyjae Spears in that draft because my bet on Rachaad White is that he stays healthy and scores for me all year. So I'd rather take the high upside handcuff elsewhere than handcuff the guy to my guy.
I draft philosophical question here on handcuffs and for running backs. So I used to, even when I would play like national tournaments, right, where you have to beat out thousands of people, I still had to have my handcuff, man. Like if I draft Arian Foster, Ben Tate's a bad example, but whoever, if I'm drafting Adrian Peterson, like I had to make sure I got the Vikings backup running back. Anytime I invested heavily into that, I had to get the backup. Now the last few years, I think I've come around where if I have to beat out all these teams, I want to increase my variance, right? And I think you're actually you're handicapping yourself a little bit. I probably shouldn't use that word. You're setting yourself up for a middling performance. If you go with the backup, your guy's own backup running back on his team. Like if you have, Chase Edmonds, or if you have Sean Tucker and Rachaad White goes down, okay, well, you'll still plug along. But if you have Rachaad White and he doesn't go down, and then instead of taking Tucker, you have, I don't know, Deion Jackson we'll talk about in a little bit, assuming Taylor's still out. Now, all of a sudden, you have 2 top 10 running backs or potential 2 top 10 running backs, right? Is that how you handle it for like a national tournament where you're drafting other people's backup running backs rather than your own?
Primarily, I would say the only way to really do handcuffing wrong is to be an absolutist either way. I think at this point, there are a lot of people who are too strongly in the camp of you never take a handcuff. Like if I have Derrick Henry, I'll take Tyjae Spears on that team, because if Derrick Henry goes down, I think Tyjae Spears is going to be the clear backfield leader for a team that wants to run the ball a lot, and he's electric. And then, I'm not waiting for somebody else to go down. I've got the guy to plug in if Derrick Henry's out for my playoffs. I don't think, however, that you should say, this is who I drafted at running back in round 1 or round 2, especially round 3 or below that. So I need to get whoever the number 2 back is there. I think that's how handcuffing got to be a problem worth fixing in the first place, was the notion that you had to get that guy and then everybody chasing that guy. And then that led to the research saying, we don't really always know. We don't do a very good job of knowing who the handcuff is in a lot of spots. And at this point, especially, most teams don't have a straight handcuff that is going to take all of the work that the injured guy is leaving behind. And even those who do are almost 100% of the time going to be less productive than the guys they're replacing. So, always chasing the handcuff, not a great idea, but never taking a handcuff, I think, is a mistake.
The handcuff gumbo is a very difficult recipe to perfect, right? You have to throw in some clarity of the player in there. You have to throw in some talent of the player in there. You have to throw in, clarity of the backfield and mix that in. Like it's got to be just the right mixture, because if it's not, then all of a sudden it's not going to taste very good when you're taking that, whoever that player is in the 12th, 13th round or what have you, right? And I think you bring up a lot of good points there of the proper ingredients and the proper amount of those ingredients to go in there. Yes, I'm hungry. I'm sorry. Moving on to the Colts running back situation. Chris Ballard said that Jonathan Taylor was still complaining of pain in his ankle, which was apparently led for the reason for him being placed on the PUP list. Now, I bring this up because I remember, was it a couple of beat writers or was it national guys that said Taylor was complaining of back pain? This is like a month or so ago. You remember that report, Matt? Who did that come from?
I don't remember exactly, but yeah.
Okay, but Taylor denied it right away, right? Mm-hmm. The ankle stuff, I haven't seen him push back on at all, and I know he did have the surgery. Is there? I mean, I guess this is just another reason to avoid him, whether it's an ankle thing or whether it's not an ankle thing. Either way, you got to be hating Jonathan Taylor right now as far as his ADP goes, and it has been slipping quite a bit. Again, in the drafts we just did, I saw him go in the 8th round. I saw him go in the 4th round. So it's a huge scope as far as where he's going. To me, this is maybe even a bigger stay away than Cooper Kupp, because we know Kupp and the Rams want, they're on the same page. They want him to be on the field. I honestly don't know what the Colts want and what Taylor want. Well, I know what Taylor wants. And Jim Irsay and I mean, it's just, dysfunctional enough in Indianapolis to make me think maybe this lasts all season. And I never see Taylor. I'm not taking him anywhere. I got him in a couple of dynasty leagues, and I probably should look at trading him, but you're not going to get much for him at this point. But redraft, dude, I can't make a case to take Taylor just about anywhere in the first 10 rounds.
Yeah, me either now. And the landing on the PUP list happened a day or two after I took him in round 3 of my FFPC Main Event slow draft. And, it was at the point where it's like, maybe he gets traded, but at the very least he's coming back. And so I was like, all right, round 3, I pick 308. I guess I'll take a shot here. It's $4 million. I'm trying to beat this huge field. And then the news comes, oh, he's going to miss the first 4 games. I'm like, crap, should have taken Josh Allen. But yeah, I tell anybody at this point, if they say, where should I take Jonathan Taylor? I'm like, it's totally up to you. And if you want to pass on him completely, I completely understand. Because like you said, anything could happen in this scenario. And that's what you have to look at, is not just whether you think he's going to play after this stint on the PUP is done. It's, you have to look at all of the various risk paths. And the only path that works out is, I guess the only path that we know would be good is if he comes back in week 5 and lands with a team that's a good situation and is ready to make him the feature back. But even coming back in week 5 to the Colts could be bad, because they've got Anthony Richardson, which could make it a worse situation for this guy that's supposed to dominate touchdowns, short yardage carries and all that. So yeah, at this point, unless he gets to round 8, 9, 10, and it's why not? Then I can't advocate for him.
I think the other thing too is, and we kind of danced around it, but if this ankle thing is legit, I mean, I don't want to draft a running back with not only a bum ankle, but a guy who's just had surgery on it too. This probably makes it easier to avoid all the Colts, but according to NFL insider Aaron Wilson, Deion Jackson expected to start week 1. Now, I know Moss has been practicing. I don't know if he's going to be active this week, but again, Jackson, Moss, the rookie Evan Hull is there as well, the pass catcher extraordinaire. And you have a situation where, like you just said, Richardson is probably going to be much more apt to use his freakish legs. I mean, the most freaky quarterback we've seen at the NFL Combine ever. It's much easier for him to just take off and run than find the open player and dump it off to a running back. I think that if Jackson starts, he's by no means a guarantee to get 15 or 20 touches. Quite frankly, maybe not even 10 touches. Mm-hmm. These guys are not going high in drafts right now. A lot of people have drafted already. There's nobody on bye this week. Jackson, Moss, Hull. Just keep these guys on your bench this week, regardless of if Moss or Jackson starts, right?
Yeah. And feel free to not roster them too. The fact that we don't know who the leader of this group is only makes it more, it makes it easier to pass on. I don't want, the only one that I'm taking here is very late Evan Hull, basically in case Jonathan Taylor never plays for the Colts again. And at some point later this season, Evan Hull takes over the backfield, because I think he's probably the best talent bet among them, but I'm not looking to this group for any early season starter.
I'm going to come off as a boomer sizist here. Do you think Hull is big enough to be the focal point of the backfield?
I think that focal points in the backfield come in all sizes now, Eric.
Okay. All right. Yeah. See, I told you. It's like saying like, all right, this is going to come off as racist, and then you say a completely racist comment. I'm a boomer sizist. This is going to come off very sizist, and you politely scolded me, which I appreciate, and I will do better next time.
I do think 5'10", 209 is big enough, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think because he's such a good pass catcher, I just automatically assume, like, okay, when we talk about these rookie running backs or whatever, like even before the NFL draft, when we don't know everything about all these guys, if one of the first things that gets into my brain about a player is that he's a really good pass catcher, just automatically I'm like, okay, can't carry the load, can't run between the tackles, but he's a good pass catcher. Okay, and I want the volume guys, right? I mean, I want typically you want a volume guy that can also catch passes. So maybe I got it in my mind, but yeah, he is not a bad size. 5'10", 210, like that's fine. That'll work. And he is a guy that was selected this year when they already had Jackson, when they already had Zach Moss on the team. They still went out and got Hull. So that's another thing to keep in mind too, as we carry on with the running back report right now. Miami Dolphins, Jeff Wilson on IR. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, yes, we've heard of him. He expects him to return ahead of week 5. This is agent talk, right? I drafted Jeff Wilson in several leagues. Some leagues with the preseason waiver wire now behind us. Some leagues I kept them. Some leagues I didn't. I have no qualms about anybody wanting to cut Jeff Wilson right now. If you want to go with a lottery ticket type guy, another injury away type guy, the fact that you basically, in order to get anything from Wilson, you have to keep him on for the first 4 weeks of the season when you are guaranteed to get 0 points from him, to me is not appetizing at all. Mm-hmm. And by the way, when he comes back, we don't know what Devon Achane is going to look like. We don't know what Raheem Mostert's going to be looking like, if he's healthy or not. It's like, even if he comes back, there's no guarantee that you can start playing him in week 5. Jeff Wilson is I mean, for anybody who's drafting this weekend, I'd look elsewhere. And quite frankly, if you want to cut him, go ahead. Right, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. This is a backfield that's much more appetizing for best ball, because it's probably going to be inconsistent when everybody is healthy, and it should be for Miami's sake. Why ride just one guy when you have several guys who are good? Jeff Wilson was one of my highest owned best ball players. I mean, he still is, because it's not like I can drop him from those teams. So I'm certainly hoping that Drew Rosenhaus is telling us the truth and that he's back in week 5. It is a great situation for running back scoring. And if we could do team running back, Dolphins running back would be attractive in drafts. But I agree. At the moment he landed on IR to start the season, I immediately became uninterested in drafting Jeff Wilson because he's just not somebody that you have to cling to. I don't think something special's coming. He's just going to give us some useful games if he's healthy later this season.
We got one final bullet point I want to get to on the running back report. Before we do that, JAC's in the YouTube chat right now, and they want to know if they should be dropping Zach Ertz for Sam Laporta before the game tonight. He said that his rationale for keeping Ertz around is always seems to finish top 10. He's going to be playing on an offense that is going to be throwing quite a bit this year, playing from behind quite a bit. It's for his backup tight end spot. Matt, I don't know how you feel, but if I'm JAC, I'm running to the waiver wire to pick up Sam Laporta and dropping Zach Ertz. I don't really see much of a ceiling for Ertz this year. You got Trey McBride there. There's no guarantee that the quarterback play is going to be any good. And Laporta's guy, I have a couple of teams where Laporta is actually my starting tight end, right, where I waited on tight end. And I have a couple of teams where my two tight ends are Laporta and Luke Musgrave, and I'm fine with it. Like, I think this year, it probably won't happen in September, but I think in October or maybe early November, people are going to be kicking themselves for letting guys like Laporta, Musgrave, even Dalton Kincaid to a certain extent. He's probably going the highest of all of them. They're going to be kicking themselves for not picking these guys up earlier. So for sure, especially when it's your backup tight end spot, like that's where you should be rostering upside. So with me, I don't see a whole lot of upside with Ertz, but man, I see potential league winning upside with Sam Laporta.
I almost muted myself here so I could run and join this league just to pick up Sam Laporta to play him against Kansas City tonight, because we're going to get a quick look. And, maybe he does come along slowly. You don't want to get too carried away with the rookie tight end, but there has been buzz nonstop since he got there. He lands in a spot where they need pass catchers. Obviously, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, they have Jahmyr Gibbs, but beyond that, it's pretty open for at least 6 weeks while Jameson Williams is out. And tonight they get a matchup against a Chiefs team that's been favorable against tight ends. So we get a good first spot with Detroit as a road dog. So we could get shootout conditions. I mean, I would not be at all surprised if Sam Laporta catches 5 balls tonight.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. And then that's going to make it very intriguing. Again, for all the drafts that we have going on at Planet Hollywood here in Las Vegas, we got drafts going right after the game tonight. We got drafts going all day Saturday as well, all day Friday and all day Saturday. Laporta is going to shoot way up. If he catches 5 balls tonight, you best believe that he's going to be moving up draft boards. Final thing I want to bring up in the running back report, Saad Yusuf, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Saad Yusuf. Sorry. John Machota, the Cowboys beat writers for The Athletic, said that Rico Dowdle is the, quote, best running back best equipped to handle the Ezekiel Elliott void as a runner. Now, I know Deuce Vaughn is getting a lot of pub, and there's a lot of people excited about drafting him late, and he's moving up a little bit. But Dowdle is a player that's slipping. He's a guy that is not a very exciting guy. But when you talk about a potential Pollard injury, I think Dowdle is the guy I'd want on that team, especially with Brian Schottenheimer coming in, and the fact that you can get him so much later. Man, I love getting him late. Is that the way? How would you see this backfield if Pollard were to go down? 2-part question. If Pollard were to go down, how does the backfield shake out? And let's say Pollard's healthy, what kind of a role do you think Vaughn and Dowdle will have this year?
I think we would be looking at a committee if Pollard went down, because we'll see how good Deuce Vaughn is in actual NFL games. I think he's probably the best player there behind Tony Pollard. Dowdle has size. He doesn't have anything behind him in terms of production. And I think he's going in this, absolutely no risk range of drafts or not getting drafted. So it's like you can stash him on the bench and just see what happens. Normally, if people start getting excited about a player like that, then he's set up to disappoint. I think there's Mike Davis potential to him if people got excited. And I think if Tony Pollard went down, people would be like, oh, I'm getting Rico Dowdle. I'm going to start him this week. And that's when you could get into trouble. But he's definitely in a range where it's fine to stash him. And I do think that it's a backfield that should have some work available. I mean, Tony Pollard didn't even lead the Cowboys in carries last year. So I think that will be the case this year. He will lead the team in carries, but he's also not going to carry 300 times, I hope, or else he's going to break.
Yeah.
So there's going to be something available. Not sure yet if it's going to be enough to make somebody else fantasy viable. And I think when writers say something like fill the Ezekiel Elliott void, it's a little bit potentially problematic, or maybe trying to get people going on him. Maybe it's purposeful. I don't think that we're going to get another Zeke Elliott, but there is opportunity, especially if Tony Pollard were to go down and Dowdle's, in a why not range of drafts.
What about the two great fantasy football team names we just came up with out of this discussion? Which one's better, Mike Davis potential or Ezekiel Elliott void? Those are two great team names. I don't know which one I like better.
Yeah, I'd have to go Zeke Elliott void because people would probably just think I was making fun of some dude named Mike Davis that I work with.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So the issue with correct me if I'm wrong. Did the Cowboys not have the most running back carries of anybody in the NFL last year? Are you surprised to see then guys like Vaughn and Dowdell not going higher? Just again in a vacuum, shouldn't these players be going? I'll bring up the ADP right now because every time I see it, I'm like, God, why is he not going? And if you like this guy, why is he not going higher? Deuce Vaughn, 1601, Rico Dowdell, 1803. These guys should be going higher, Matt.
I mean, I think it's appropriate though, because we don't really know anything about him. Deuce Vaughn, we haven't seen anybody, like him run the ball a lot. You could say Darren Sproles. Even if we give him Darren Sproles credit, we've seen one guy do it so far. So, and then Rico Dowdell, like I said, if people were pushing him up in drafts, I think that would be the mistake because he's had several years to do something and just hasn't done anything yet, whether it be catch on with another team or break through with the Cowboys. So, somebody's probably going to do something, but I think it'll also look a lot like last year with the Colts after Jonathan Taylor went down, where nobody was doing anything special. And then maybe it's Deuce Vaughn. He's the one that interests me the most because we just don't have, any real spectrum to put him on to say he could be this or he could be this.
Yeah, and that's what you want to do. You want to be taking chances, swing for the home runs late in the 16th round of your draft. Let's get to George Play 01 hanging out on YouTube watching the show tonight. Thank you so much, George. Deontay Johnson or Sky Moore. This is non-PPR here. And I think to me, it was a slam dunk with Deontay Johnson, but it got a little bit more intriguing with the Kelsey injury. Which way would you be leaning on this?
Non-PPR, I say Sky Moore because I think he has a better chance of scoring. You generally want to chase targets, but I don't think we know what target share looks like for Sky Moore here. And I think there's a chance that Pittsburgh starts out the season with a tough offensive performance against San Francisco. So I'm taking a shot on Sky Moore in non-PPR. If it were PPR, I'd probably go Deontay Johnson.
I think, and that's where I would fall in on that. I think because of the Kelsey thing and the fact that, Mahomes is not going to have that big target in the red zone. Maybe Sky Moore makes a play. Maybe he doesn't even make a play. The thing is too, you have to consider the matchup here. San Francisco could be suffocating for Johnson and the rest of that Steelers offense. The Lions ain't stopping anybody. This is the big issue I have. Not that I want to turn this into an anti-Lions thing. This is the big issue I have. I think Detroit got Jack Campbell right in the draft early. I don't really see that they did a whole lot else on that defense to shore it up, which was historically bad for the majority of the season last year. I think it's wheels up and I'll say that I'll lump the Vikings in there too. It's wheels up for the Lions and Vikings skill position players this year. I think those defenses are no good. They're going to be a lot of shootouts. Could be a shootout tonight. Just, it's fantasy football. It's supposed to be fun. Have some fun tonight. Start Sky Moore over Deontay Johnson. We're going to have a lot more fun coming up in hour number 2 of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network. We're going to find out where Matt Schauf stands on certain players like Justin Herbert, like DeAndre Swift. Oh, Eagles. Yeah, we're going to get into that as well. And Kenneth Walker plus more. We're also going to go through his main event draft that is completed. Hopefully give you some tips if you're drafting in the FFPC main event. I'm live out at Planet Hollywood Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada for the FFPC live events. Plenty of drafts going on, both live out here and online. Go to myffpc.com and register for those. And if you're looking for the best advice out there, draftsharks.com, Matt Schauf, at SchaufDS. Not only will be dispensing stuff on the show tonight, but check out all his work at draftsharks.com. This is the HSFF show. I am Eric Balkman. He's Matt Schauf. We roll on the Better Sports Network right after this.
What can we expect for you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. It's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3. Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
Yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no!
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Let me tell you a little bit about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription plus Fantasy Football Draft Guide and the cheat sheet. Free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription could be yours. Get all the Week 1 content and picks for free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/NFL, fantasyalarm.com/NFL. Eric Balkman from the HSFF Hour on the HSFF Show tonight. Also from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown and the FFPC. Coming at you live from Planet Hollywood Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. The viewing party for all the FFPC players started about an hour ago. I can hear it's a rip-roaring good time going on out there right now. Can't wait to join them in a little bit. But before, I'm going to do something that's a little bit more enjoyable, and that's pick the brain of Matt Schauf at Schauf DS on X, at DraftSharks on X, DraftSharks.com. What's the journey like for you preparing for an NFL season with, drafting season going on? It seems like drafting season starts earlier and earlier every year, Matt. I mean, I think we usually release our first NFL drafts now for the following season, right after Wild Card weekend. Like, people are just jonesing for it, right? And so we started offering. I can't imagine, as a content creator and an award-winning content creator like you are, I can't imagine what this process is like for you.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's earlier every year because it is, and that's made it changing every year. I mean, I'm drafting all year at this point, which is lovely. So, that really changes it, because it used to be I would take January basically off because the season's a grind. And then February, really start getting into the numbers, researching last year, start working on projections for the following year, and then just kind of roll into the content. But now that we're drafting, we're getting immediate looks at what the market is. We can start thinking about how we think the market's going to change, start looking for edges. I especially like those early drafts because, I am used to getting into fantasy a lot earlier than everybody else. So I feel like I do have an edge at that point. And I think that I'm better than a lot of people at I don't know, looking at situations and predicting what's going to happen, or seeing who's over or undervalued and reacting that way. So different every year. We've added guys at draftsharks.com this year to the staff, so that changed things. We've got, plenty of things changed about the website over the past few years. So it's cool to have it be different every year. I don't want it to be the same thing every year. Otherwise it's going to be a grind and I might get a little bored.
What's and maybe you kind of already answered this, what's your favorite part about working for Draft Sharks and doing everything you do there? What's your favorite part about it? And then what's your least favorite part about it? And don't worry, Lenny Papano's not watching, so you can be quite frank and tell me it's him.
My favorite part is that I have to draft and it's for work.
Right.
But I also love writing about it. I also love talking about it on videos like this. I've always enjoyed that aspect. And, it didn't take long after I started getting into doing fantasy content. I didn't think about doing it in the first place. I had somebody ask me to do it, and I was like, I don't know. I've only been playing fantasy for a couple of years.
This because you were like a newspaper sports guy, right?
Not even a sports guy. I was just a copy editor. I mean, I was always a sports guy, but I wasn't in sports there. Okay. I was a copy editor. I was a page designer, and I was just, friends with the sports staff, and the sports editor at the small paper is like, hey, you want to do a fantasy column? Like, yeah, I guess so.
And Matt Schauf's career is born. We all have your former boss to thank for you getting into the space, you getting into the industry, and treating us to all the great content you curate and create. Let's find out where you stand on certain players. I don't know how many of these we're going to get to right now, but we'll get to as many as we can. First up is a player that is going probably as late as he's ever gone in his short career in the FFPC. Najee Harris, running back 13. He's fallen to 404. So you can get him in the early to mid fourth round. Matt Schauf, where do you stand on Najee Harris at that price this year?
I'm out. I don't have anything to get excited about with him. He's been inefficient both years in the NFL so far. I don't believe that the offense is going to be excellent, even if the skill players are better and Kenny Pickett is better than I expect him to be. I don't trust the OC to actually leverage the talent there. And Najee Harris is giving up work to Jaylen Warren. I'm not saying he's going to get passed by Jaylen Warren, but he's giving work to him. And the only thing that Najee Harris has had going for him fantasy-wise so far is work volume. So if he's losing that, he's going to have to suddenly become more efficient. And that's just betting that happens with somebody who has only been inefficient is just a bad bet.
What about Kenneth Walker? Where do you stand on him? This is kind of a tricky one. Quite frankly, I haven't made up my mind about him. Usually when I don't make up my mind about players, I just tend not to draft them, and I'll find somebody else that I actually like there. And Kenneth Walker is sort of a byproduct. Maybe I have him one league, maybe two. I don't even think I have him in two. I think I got him in one league, and that's it. Right now, he's going at the 502, and this is another guy whose ADP fluctuated based on that injury, and then the way that Pete Carroll handled not only Kenneth Walker's injury reporting, but Zach Charbonnet's injury report. I'm like, we thought the injury to Charbonnet was going to be much worse. And then all of a sudden he was back right away, and it took Walker longer to get back. Right now, running back 17 for Kenneth Walker. He's going at the 502, right behind Breece Hall and Dameon Pierce, right ahead of James Cook, Alexander Madison. Where do you stand on Walker?
I'm kind of where you are. I'm not really sure. I don't want to be totally out, but I'm also not in. I would be more in if Seattle didn't spend a second-round pick on a running back and then tout his pass catching, because that's what Kenneth Walker needs to do, is catch some passes. Otherwise, he's, a faster LeGarrette Blount. And I don't mean to say that he's the exact same level of talent, but that's if you're not catching enough passes, then you're a very limited fantasy producer, and you're not going to do something special as a running back. So I'm kind of at the stage where I hope somebody takes Kenneth Walker before I get to the point where I feel like I should, just so I don't have to justify it either way. And it's tough to get excited about him in a range where there are also guys like Miles Sanders, James Conner, Rachaad White. So I'm like, why take him here when I can wait till the next round and still have three guys that I feel pretty similar about?
I wonder if there's validity to this. When Najee Harris got drafted, that was a bad year for running backs. I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot of running backs to get excited about. Dynasty rookie drafts usually always set the table. They're the appetizer for drafting season, right? And obviously Harris went very early, not only because he was an early round pick, but he was like the only running back that people are excited about this year or that year. And I almost wonder if that's still in our minds and we still treat Najee Harris better than we should. Like, what would have happened if he came out that year and it was a great running back year and he kind of gets lost in the shuffle? What if he was in that class, but he was not as heralded as some of these other guys, and he kind of goes, in the mix with all those other running backs? Would we still be taking him this high? Because I feel like if it wasn't for the volume, the inefficiency should drive him way lower than the 4th round. I wonder if that's still in our heads right now with Harris. It's probably a non-zero chance that that's the case with some people.
It's two things. He was a 1st round pick, and then he got monster volume as a rookie. And so now everybody's like, well, he won my league as a rookie and he was a 1st round pick. Of course they're going to give him the ball. And I remember this production. He was hurt last year. That's always the argument. He was hurt the first half of last year. Well, it seemed like he was not hurt the second half of last year, and he was still ceding work to Jaylen Warren. And that was masked by Pittsburgh ramping up running back volume in the second half of last season. They were like a 45% pass team at that point. If they do that again this year, they're going to be a crappy offense and nobody's going to deliver fantasy points. So, that's all part of, I just don't see the path where he's paying off. And from where he's going, I won't tell people that he's an awful pick. If he delivers RB 14 numbers for the season from there, fine. But I'd rather target somebody there that I think could turn into the RB3 for the season. And if I don't think that guy has that upside, then why am I bothering buying the RB14 instead of waiting for the RB18 or the RB20?
Jets running backs. Let's talk about them. Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook. It's weird because Dalvin Cook's ADP didn't change much once he signed with the Jets. Running back 15 for Hall, running back 31 for Dalvin Cook. Hall, you got to sink a late 4th round pick into getting him. Cook, you can wait until the mid 8th round. Do you have a preference based on those ADPs? Where do you stand on Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook this year?
Yeah, I prefer to not have either of them. And then if I'm picking one, I'll take Breece Hall. And I think because his ADP slipped, now he makes some sense. If you're taking him in round 4, you're hoping that by the end of the year, he's healthier, he's getting closer to the amount of work that they would like to give to him, and that they're treating Dalvin Cook basically like Zeke Elliott last year in Dallas to Breece Hall's Tony Pollard, maybe even with more touch upside for Breece Hall versus Tony Pollard. I can't say that I'm interested in Dalvin Cook because I think his ceiling only comes in with Breece Hall getting hurt, and I imagine they protect him. There's certainly the chance that Breece Hall goes down again, but I'm also not sure that he controls that backfield. I don't know. Maybe I'm not even making sense. And as I say it, I'm like, maybe I should like Dalvin Cook more than I do, but he's going in a range too, where he's not standing out to me beyond other guys that have similar upside. If I'm taking an RB30, I would rather have somebody that I might be able to play even without somebody getting hurt. And I don't think that he's going to get enough work to be a standalone value unless Breece Hall goes down. So it's just been a situation I don't talk myself into a whole lot. And if I do, it's Breece Hall because he slipped around 5.
What do you make of, I think the other thing to keep in mind too, is the Jets offensive line is not good. In fact, it's probably bad. I think that's fair to say. And the counter argument to that was, well, it was bad last year and look what Breece Hall did, right? Should we be talking more about should the offensive line be factoring more into this conversation, or the fact that what we saw from Hall last year was fantastic and he could have been the 101 this year if he wouldn't have torn his ACL? How does the offensive line factor into this conversation for you? I guess for you, it doesn't really matter because you're trying to stay away from both regardless.
Yeah. And it's not even so much like full fading them. I think they're probably just both going at appropriate prices where they're not values. And that I think keeps the offensive line from being as much of a topic within it. And, when Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, if he plays the way that the Jets spent hoping that he will play, then the offensive line shouldn't matter a whole lot. And if Breece Hall gets back close to being Breece Hall, then the offensive line shouldn't matter a whole lot. And if the offense is just good, then that'll help Dalvin Cook. It's kind of like, everybody there is fine. So there's only so much to talk about because I don't think anybody at this point is excited enough, either positively or negatively, to actually have an argument on it.
Yeah, that's a good point too. From one Cook brother to the other, James Cook in Buffalo. I've seen this guy creeping up a little bit today in drafts, Matt. And I look at where he's been going over the last 2 days in the FFPC main event. You're looking at the mid 5th round. I saw him creeping up a little bit higher, late 4th, early 5th round right now. I guess there's a lot to like about James Cook. But the situation that there's some problems there. You think about all the problems Buffalo's had trying to identify that big time running back that they can use with quite frankly an elite offense, and just hasn't happened over the last few years. That Josh Allen is going to get some short yardage stuff in that offense, and if he doesn't, it could be Damian Harris or Latavius Murray. Where do you stand on James Cook as running back 18 in the mid-5th round?
I think the people that think James Cook is going to be a difference maker this year are overrating him. And I'm surprised that ADP hasn't pushed him up farther than it has to this point. You mentioned that you've seen him creep up in spots, and I've seen that too, but generally he's still staying around that bottom of RB2 range and even in between RB24 and RB30. So I've been, waiting to call him overrated, but he hasn't quite gotten to the point where I'm telling people that it's a bad idea to pick him. I'm also not targeting him because the reason I think he has the potential to be overrated is whenever a guy is a running back in college and he doesn't lead his backfield in carries, isn't a standout back among teammates in college, it's a red flag. It's not, it doesn't signal that he can't be that guy in the NFL, but it makes it less likely. And people will say, oh, he shared the field with Zamir White. Yeah, Zamir White was a day 3 pick who is now a backup in the NFL and who I also think is overrated and who was less efficient than James Cook on the ground in college and yet still got more carries consistently than James Cook did. So I think James Cook is fine. He's going to lead that backfield in touches. I don't know how much he's going to leave the field near the goal line. I don't think any of us has any idea. All it took was one Damian Harris preseason touchdown for everybody to say, oh crap, James Cook is going to give the ball to Damian Harris at the goal line every time, and nobody's going to give us any points. He's going to score some. Devin Singletary was a useful fantasy back in Buffalo. I know everybody wants James Cook to be like a supercharged Devin Singletary. I just think maybe he's a bit more charged than supercharged.
Interesting. So this is going to be right in your wheelhouse, and no pressure, but whatever you tell me about the Eagles running backs here, specifically DeAndre Swift, I'm going to hold it in much higher regard than anybody else right now. Let's start with DeAndre Swift. Where do you stand on him this year? I look over the last couple of days in the FFPC main event. DeAndre Swift is going at running back 29, mid-7th round.
I'm so out. I mean, if you
even at that price, even in the mid-7th round, you're still out.
I was going to say, if you say, I'm taking DeAndre Swift there, I'm not going to be like, you're an idiot, but I'm not taking him there. He's going to be there for you because I'm not taking him. Because what is his ceiling? He catches a bunch of passes, not in Philly, I don't think. He gets a bunch of goal line carries, not in Philly or anywhere else. He didn't do that in Detroit. I mean, they gave the ball to Jamal Williams instead, and then they liked Jamal Williams so much that they let him walk in free agency and signed David Montgomery to replace him. Then they traded away DeAndre Swift. Instead of just keeping him for one more year, they were like, we got to get rid of this soft guy that's never on the field, delivering for us. Now, when he initially got traded to Philly, I'm like, oh, Philly values draft picks. They know how to work the market. The fact that they spent a 4th round pick says that they really like DeAndre Swift. So then we get to the summer, and now it's not even clear that he's the top back in a committee. So that to me is just kind of like the last nail where I'm like, I just not worth it. I'm going to get somebody that I have to guess when to play him. He doesn't have his best path to upside open to him in Philly because it's just not a good place for him to get receptions. And now it's not even clear that he's ahead of Kenneth Gainwell. Why am I taking DeAndre Swift when I can wait another several rounds and take Kenneth Gainwell still?
Because okay, I think that the big differentiating factor here is ADP. Swift is running back 29, yet Penny and Gainwell are actually going almost next to each other. Penny is running back 44, Gainwell's running back 46. You can wait 4 rounds and either take Penny or Gainwell. Sounds like you made your decision. You'd rather have Gainwell than Penny.
Yeah, and if you get to that point, why not take the guy who can run and catch passes? And like, my first thought, I was not drafting Kenny Gainwell to start this draft season because they had him on the team. They let Miles Sanders walk, but then they signed Rashad Penny right away. And then they traded a draft pick for DeAndre Swift. So I'm like, okay, they don't think that much of Kenneth Gainwell. But now it seems the opposite. They just wanted to collect guys at modest costs and have as much talent in that backfield without spending much on any of them as they could. And then you have to remember that Kenneth Gainwell last year in the playoffs was their lead back for several games. And I don't think that that signals they believe he's better than Miles Sanders or that he's the backfield leader this year. But if he's going to be the last one in ADP, and he has a history of being somebody that they trusted to touch the ball, not only in catches, but carry the ball in the playoffs, I'm taking that guy late in the draft and seeing what happens.
Was going to ask you about Deebo Samuel. I think we touched on him enough in the first hour. Deontay Johnson, we actually touched a little bit on him when we were talking with George Play 01 as far as Johnson goes this year. That was more of a weekly question. Let me just briefly ask, where do you stand on Deontay Johnson this year, Matt?
I'm in. Like, it's a modest in because I think that the offense is going to try to run the ball a lot, even though they should pass it plenty. And I still don't trust Kenny Pickett. I know he had a good preseason, and I'm more open to the possibility that he's at least decent now. I'm just not sure we're going to get quite enough volume for Deontay Johnson to get all the way back up to where he was in the pass-happy Ben Roethlisberger final couple of years. But I think he's at least a solid pick at ADP. I think there's not a whole lot of risk to taking Deontay Johnson as a low-end wide receiver 3. And I think that there is at least upside into, wide receiver 20 range.
If we were going to have breaking news on the show tonight, I think a lot of us would just assume that there was going to be an early score in the game while we're on the air. That is not why we're breaking in with this news. Joe Burrow, new deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, 5 years, $275 million, $219 million guaranteed. He is now the highest paid player in NFL history, according to Adam Schefter's sources. Adam Schefter from ESPN. Mind blown. First thing I think of here, does that mean T. Higgins, they don't have any money to extend him now, Matt?
I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, I don't even know where NFL money comes from other than doofuses like us spending all the money on Sunday Ticket and fantasy and trying to get other people to do so as well.
Lamar Jackson, 5 years, 260. Jalen Hurts, 5 years, 255. Justin Herbert, 5 years, 262. And now you're looking at 5 years, 275 for Joe Burrow. Who's going to be the next $3 million quarterback? That's our $300 million quarterback, or the first $300 million quarterback. I don't know who that's going to be. I don't know whose contract is coming up.
It's probably somebody playing tonight. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is just sitting there. His agent's
like,
all right, guys.
But Mahomes, here's the thing with Mahomes, and I understand what you're saying, but he's come out publicly at least a couple of times, maybe even more than that, saying that wins are more important to him. I think he could be the Brady type guy where he's just never the highest paid guy, and he's totally cool with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but he started this run being the highest paid player. I mean, the contracts are just going to keep climbing. There's going to be somebody that we look at and we're like, how is that guy the highest paid? It's because he's just the next one. They just keep climbing. We keep pumping money into this sport. They're going to pass it on to the players. And it's probably best if we just ignore those numbers beyond what they mean for playing time and how much a franchise trusts a guy.
Well, I'd love it if the Packers gave Jordan Love $300 million because that would mean a lot of great things for Green Bay. If they're getting him $300 million, it seems like they hit on this third quarterback in a row. That remains to be seen. Speaking of the Packers, let's stay in the NFC North. We'll go. We'll do a double shot here. Where do you stand on Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet? It's fine if you like one and don't like the other. This is just more of a question about the Bears' passing offense this year with Justin Fields.
As far as I'm concerned, those guys don't exist anymore. I mean, maybe Darnell Mooney's still better than Chase Claypool, but they had Darnell Mooney on the team. They traded a second-round pick for Chase Claypool, and then they traded for DJ Moore. So that doesn't tell me they want to do much with Darnell Mooney. And I think Cole Kmet's just a limited player in an offense that's one of the worst bets in the league to actually give him enough volume to be anything.
What's funny is I drafted in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship during the Super Bowl where they had drafts or whatever. We had our preseason waiver wire run last night, and players like Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave, they weren't even drafted back then in February. I mean, so and you only start one tight end in this league, non-tight end premium scoring. On one of my teams, I already had Cole Kmet and David Njoku, and I'm like, well, I'm going to price enforce and on these tight ends. Nobody should be getting Kincaid and these guys for free. Well, I spent probably about $650 out of my $1,000, and now I not only have Njoku and Kmet, I have Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid on that team. And, oh, by the way, it's not best ball, obviously. So I got to figure out which one of these guys to start every week. It's not going to be fun. You just sold me on Cole Kmet being my next drop at tight end there. Last one, we'll just touch on him real briefly. I talked about how I want to see his arm fall off, but I don't want to actually see Justin Herbert's arm fall off. man, he's going to be cranking it over all over the field this year in Los Angeles with Kellen Moore. If you look at where he is in relation to the other, elite quarterbacks up at the top of the board right now, Justin Herbert is quarterback 6. He is behind Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, and the new $275 million man, Joe Burrow. Where do you stand on Justin Herbert at the 502?
I love Justin Herbert. I have lots of him for this year. I have loved him since he started in the league. I have loved him since he was a prospect. I'm always going to feel a connection to Justin Herbert because the year he came out, I was watching him, scouting him for the scouting report that we do on all the relevant rookies coming in. And I'm like, why are people down on this guy? He spent 4 years starting. He has a terrific arm. He can run. It's clear that Oregon just deteriorated around him, and that's why his numbers fell off. Why is he behind Tua Tagovailoa in this class? So ever since then, I was arguing him over Tua in that class, and then when he hit right away, I'm like, oh man, you and I are going to be best friends.
Speaking of best friends, I'm about to hang out with a bunch at the FFPC viewing party, which means that it's almost kickoff. We're going to step out and take a quick break. I'm going to give you a little bit of homework to do on the break. You can actually play a better cast tonight during the Lions and Chiefs NFL kickoff. You can predict what's going to happen in the game to score points and win prizes, chat with the community in real time, watch the game, play our free contest, win prizes. Go ahead and download the BetterCast app in the App Store and Google Play right now. When we come back, we're going to take one spin through Matt Schauf's main event slow draft that he completed in the FFPC. And we're going to highlight some of the picks. Don't worry, Matt, we won't talk about that Jonathan Taylor pick. But we're going to talk about some of the other ones and maybe help you get a better idea of what you should be doing in your main event draft, whether you're drafting online or live at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas, where I am, or if you are drafting Saturday online as well. So make sure that you are paying attention to that next segment. He's Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on next.
Like Devon Levi started off in the friend zone and now like he could possibly be wife material. So it is exceptionally hard to trust a rookie goalie in the NHL. The kid is what? He's 21. Like, okay. And he is going to the Buffalo Sabres. But we've all agreed that the Buffalo Sabres are at least a somewhat better hockey team on paper. Again, it's hard to trust a rookie goalie. We've seen future Hall of Fame goalies like, Fleury in his first year struggle, right? Carey Price in his first year struggle. It is tough for goalies to come in and have success. That being said, nobody outside of maybe a Buffalo sports fan can tell me who the 2 goalies on their roster are, because I didn't know until this morning, until I was reminded that it was Eric Comrie and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And I was like, okay, well, he has the crease to himself. So all he can do is lose it. That's all he can do. Buffalo is going to be a fun team to watch, which means maybe Devon Levi ends up in what I call the Martin Jones syndrome, which is a goals against average is pretty up there. Save percentage is not very good, but he's going to finish with 35 wins because he's just going to play a lot. And it's going to be that back and forth hockey. The Atlantic Division is not very good, right? There are some teams that are going to regress. So there's opportunities here for Buffalo to do well. And I think his over-under on wins is set at 24.5. So again, there's a lot of things that I may not trust about him, but as a 13th goalie off the board, and I think that is a reach at 13. I think a lot of people have him farther back than that. So he may be 13 on NHL.com's list, but you may end up and show up in your Yahoo or your ESPN draft and they haven't ranked probably outside of the top 20. So I would have no issue as a second goalie going with Levi, because like who's taking his spot? Nobody. And volume at one point, if you're in a league that doesn't penalize you for losses, if you're in a league that rewards saves and save bonuses like, for daily, DraftKings does, he has all that working for him. So if it doesn't work out, all right, fine. Then you can go and pick up whoever is there. But it is his net to lose. I understand the risk. I will definitely take, because that's how you win championships, right? You got to take risks to win them. If you're safe, you're going to finish, eliminated in the first round and you had a good time. Or you can try to win the championship on draft day.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Well, I'm a total idiot. I thought the game kicked off much later than it did. We're already almost done with the first quarter. 6:21 to go in the first quarter. No score between the Lions and the Chiefs. Jahmyr Gibbs, 2 carries for 18 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 2 carries for 8 yards. Be watching that one. That's interesting. Noah Gray, Jerick McKinnon each with a catch. Amon-Ra St. Brown finally with his first catch of the game. One catch for 13 yards. 0-0. We'll give you update. We'll give you another update on that before we sign off for the evening in about 20 minutes. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. Hopefully a part of your 2-screen experience tonight where you're listening to myself and Draft Sharks Matt Schauf at SchaufDS on X while you're watching the game tonight. I think it's important to understand that, there's a lot of people in the industry that don't necessarily, they'll play, but they don't play at, the highest level. And obviously I'm biased. I think the FFPC, High Stakes Fantasy Football, it is the highest level. Matt Schauf is one of those guys. We probably are going to run out of time. I don't think we'll get to your dynasty startup, but make sure everybody can check that out at draftsharks.com, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that is where, so if you're still doing dynasty startups, which you can with the FFPC, 1,500 plus leagues over the course of a decade plus, not a single one's ever folded. Great advice, good knowledge there. Draftsharks.com is where to check that out. I want to talk a little bit about your main event draft that you competed in recently, the slow draft that just ended. What's the strategy? How is it different when you're drafting in the main event, trying to beat, whatever it is, 4,000 other teams, as opposed to just beating 11 other teams in a home league? How does your strategy change?
I mean, specifically, you have to take some chances, try to do something different. You can't just build the best team to beat everybody else. I don't change it too much. I think sometimes people take it too far, like the strategy of trying to combine Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow within the first 4 rounds. To me, that's too much, treating it like a tournament at the expense of, this team that now needs something very specific to happen that's special. And if that one specific thing doesn't happen, then you don't have a shot. So I don't know, that was a little bit winding, but doing something different, taking some chances, but not overdoing the tournament aspect, I guess.
Yeah. Swinging for some home. I feel like you have to swing for more home runs in something like this than you would in your home league. But those home runs don't have to be in rounds 2, 4, and 5, or, they can be later on. That's fine. How much prep did you have after you found out you were drafting 8th to the time the draft actually started? And what was sort of the strategy that you put together knowing that's where you're going to be picking from?
So it was a slow draft. I found out earlier in the day, so I didn't bother, I wasn't looking to find it out ahead of time. I honestly don't put too much extra prep into prepping for that specific spot, because my strength with drafting, I believe, is being able to, adjust to the draft as it goes on. It's not building a plan for the 8th pick based on what's happened to that point, especially in these tournaments. I don't need to tell you, as well as anybody, these things are going to get unpredictable at some point. So if you have this plan and all of a sudden something happens to knock it off, I mean, you could be in trouble. You need to be able to change on the fly, but depending on how strict your plan is, you might be scrambling all of a sudden. I prefer to just kind of, start out with some expectation, but really go with the draft as it comes to me.
I think, and we don't need to touch on this. It looks bad that you took Taylor where you did, but and breaking news too, we have our first touchdown in the NFL season. It is Amon-Ra St. Brown. It looks like a pass from Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7-0. Break up the Lions. Super Bowl, here they come. Goff to St. Brown, 7-0 Detroit. Let's get back to the main event draft. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy you could have had in the first round. You could have had CeeDee Lamb. You went with Stephon Diggs, not an unpopular choice. I'm curious to find out what your reasoning was, why you decided, if you're going to go with receiver, why was it Diggs over Lamb and St. Brown?
I mean, and I wouldn't argue with anybody who chose one of the other guys instead of Diggs. The Buffalo offense is the best of the 3. They're all target hogs. So I guess it's really just chasing the production that Diggs gave us the past couple of years, the strength of the offense, and his target hoggery. There's no strong, there's really nothing where I'm like, this is why he's so much better than CeeDee Lamb and ARSB.
Target hoggery is another. Matt Schauf, the creator of fantasy football team names tonight. Was it, and this is kind of a question that I think you kind of already answered, but once you drafted Trevor Lawrence as your starting quarterback, how important was it to get one of his targets, which you did get very next round in Evan Ingram? Did that factor at all into the decision? Because now you're talking about, like, I think it's the stack you brought up is a very expensive one with Burrow and Higgins and Chase, right? Lawrence and Ingram doesn't cost you much. You got it done. Are these mid-round stacks more important to you, or did that not factor into it at all?
Well, I was really hoping that Justin Herbert was going to get to me. He went one pick ahead. So at that point, I had to decide whether I was going to go ahead and take a quarterback or wait. Deshaun Watson ended up going 3 rounds later. I took Trevor Lawrence because I like him. I honestly don't want to root for Deshaun Watson all season. So that was a factor. And it's not the kind of thing where if I liked Watson better, then I would still take a lesser quarterback. But it was one of those tiebreakers. Do I really want to root for him all season? I like Trevor Lawrence. I like the Jaguars, so I like rooting for them. It was not imperative to add a Jaguars pass catcher. I think for the tournament aspect, it definitely factored in more than it would in a single league. I wouldn't care whether I got a Jaguars wideout or Evan Ingram. I do like better getting Evan Ingram than Christian Kirk as a stack partner here because it's a little bit easier to see the tie between the tight end production and the quarterback. I mean, if the quarterback's doing well, he's throwing touchdowns, tight ends lean on touchdowns more than wide receivers do. I don't need as much target volume for the tight end as I do at wide receiver. And this is going to be an offense where they spread it around. So once it was getting back to there, I knew that he had a pretty good chance of getting there, or maybe it lined up with his ADP where I thought it was a decent shot. I was watching that. I was figuring that would probably be my pick. Not imperative, but I'm happy to put those two guys together.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. I know people who love, like, they will purposely go after those late round stacks because you're only looking at upside at that point. You're basically enhancing. You're giving an exponential outcome to a very small number, but you never know. And when it costs you nothing, why not? Tight ends. I'm going to ask you about Chigakonkwo here in a second, but your philosophy on tight ends and the FFPC in general. Is it important for you to get one of those elite guys? Is it important for you to get 2 of them maybe earlier on than you normally would in a non-tight end premium league? How do you normally treat that position in like, let's just say the FFPC main event?
I think it's important to get somebody with upside, and it's important not to chase, not to feel like you're at a point where you need to get a tight end. I honestly don't love Evan Ingram this year. If I didn't have Trevor Lawrence, I wouldn't have drafted him. It was just because I have his quarterback. I'll go ahead and bet that if the quarterback is going off this year, then he's going to bring Evan Ingram with him, at least plenty for it to pay off. Otherwise, I like Mark Andrews where he's going before the injury. I was fine with Travis Kelce where he was going. And then it's a matter of like weighing the value. I might have taken Darren Waller in round 3 if he had gotten there, but after that, I probably would have waited a little bit to the range where I ended up taking Evan Ingram. And like I said, if I didn't have Trevor Lawrence, I probably would have waited longer. So it really depends on where I am, who makes it to me. I passed on Mark Andrews at 2.5, looking at the board in front of me now. And he was somebody that I was thinking about there. I might come to regret that. So we'll see. But, I guess that shows that I'm not feeling like I have to get a top guy there. I think there are more ways to attack it than it might seem like for the tight end premium. I do think that you need to get a second guy and preferably another guy with upside. And I know we'll talk about Chigakonkwo as well.
I think for any strategy that people use in fantasy football, robust RB, hero RB, zero RB, zero WR, zero tight end, whatever. I think it's important to understand that whatever position you go heavy with early, if you do, don't ignore that position as the draft goes on. I've seen plenty of people draft 3 wide receivers out of their first 4 picks or 4 out of their first 6, and then they just ignore it. Like they don't take another one to like round 12 or round 13. And I think that's a mistake. And I think unless you're getting a guy like Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, maybe Darren Waller might qualify for that. I don't know. It's borderline. I think that you should be looking at a second tight end, in tight end premium leagues much earlier than you normally do. I know a lot of people like to have 2 tight ends in their first 6 rounds. I know a lot of people like to have 3 tight ends in their first 12 or 13. What I liked about this pick here with Chigakonkwo is you already had – who was the tight end that you already had on the team, on this team? Ingram. Yeah, that's right. You already had Ingram, not one of the elite guys. And you didn't rest on your laurels there. You went after another guy in the 11th round that does represent probably a significant target share in Tennessee this year. Obviously Hopkins is going to cut into that. But I look at pairing Okonkwo and Ingram. Is that your philosophy in this specific draft, that you felt like, okay, Ingram's not good enough, I need to hit another tight end here before this second wave is depleted?
Yeah, I wanted to get somebody else in this range that had some upside. And I'm not the biggest fan of Chig Okonkwo on the Draft Shark staff. I thought early in draft season, he got pushed way too far up in ADP, but that has come down since the signing of DeAndre Hopkins, and to the point where now I think he's a value. And I think that's a key too, is to go by values instead of players that you like or dislike. If Chig Okonkwo is the tight end 12, I'm not buying him. If Chig Okonkwo is the tight end 17, then I'm interested. And in the preseason, he was getting more playing time than what might have been the case. That was my concern, is maybe they just don't have a tight end that's on the field all the time, because we've seen that from Tennessee several times. Jonnu Smith before, all the tight ends that they had since then. But he got that playing time in preseason, so I think he's an upside guy. I think there's target share available, and I did want to make sure that I got somebody in this range. If it was a month ago, it probably would have been Greg Dulcich over him. But, it was the other way with him, where Denver's leading us to believe we can't count on his role. So I hope that one doesn't come back to bite me, but I like the upside of Okonkwo in round 11.
Did you have, and maybe we already discussed it, did you have a favorite pick? Like when you made the pick, it was a fist bump pick, or you looked at the draft and you gave the slow nod, like, man, I'm so glad I got that guy at that spot?
I don't think that there was really a strong one. I like the group of running backs in the middle after I had the Jonathan Taylor, fastball thrown right into my stomach. So I like getting Brian Robinson, AJ Dillon, Tyjae Spears where they went. Brian Robinson, AJ Dillon give me, decent floor guys that I don't think have the highest ceiling, but guys that I can put into my lineup, hoping that Jonathan Taylor comes back and turns into Jonathan Taylor. And then Tyjae Spears, I talked about before, round 12, I'm looking at other guys on the board. Rashad Penny was still on the board. Kenneth Gainwell was still on the board. And either of those guys might have given me a better chance at getting early season production, but I already had 4 running backs at that point. I'm already making the bet that Jonathan Taylor does come back at some point, and I've got the floor to support me for when he doesn't. So there's the time to take that tournament home run swing. And if Derrick Henry goes down, Tyjae Spears could be a player that you had to have this year.
I always hesitate to ask this question, but I feel like I have to. If you want to grade this, or just your reaction, like, I know you'll say, Balky, ask me in January and I'll tell you how I did. But I'm going to ask you right now, September 7th, 2023, how do you think you did in this draft?
I'd give myself a B because, excuse me, I'd give myself a B because Jonathan Taylor, I knew was a risky pick, and it immediately backfired on me. Now,
hold on 1 second, Matt. Let's say that he never got popped. Would that grade go up from a B?
It would probably still be in the B range. I wouldn't call it an A. I mean, I guess if he was ready to play in week 1, then I'd be like, oh, sweet, that was a good pick. Let's hope he's Jonathan Taylor. But he was still a risk. Even if he was playing right away, it's still a risky pick. I still knew there was the ankle question. I still knew he was fighting with his team. So there were, multiple risks there. That's part of it. But I think that I did a fair job coming back and answering that risk. And, this is something different from best ball, where in a best ball draft, you shouldn't take this many running backs, but this is a league I'm actually managing throughout the season. So I'm going to see which of these running backs help me. I'm going to drop who doesn't, and, get whatever else I might need.
I wonder if, I don't think it's possible. I think especially in the main event, you have to be weak somewhere, right? You just can't be strong at every single position. Where do you view your weaknesses on this team? Because normally you'd say, oh, it's running back because of what happened with Taylor, but you brought up the Robinson, Dillon, Spears picks there, and maybe that was enough to patch over that. What area of the squad are you most nervous about that's not named Jonathan Taylor?
I would say that you don't have to be weak, but there's going to be a spot where you're shaky and you need some things to go right. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is to make sure that you get the guys that can have something go right and turn a potential weakness into a strength. And I think, that especially for tournament drafting and against, these experienced players who all know what they're doing, you have to take those kind of chances. So, I mean, tight end and that RB1 spot are the spots that I'm hoping work out for me. I hope Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor late in the season. I hope my tight ends are good enough.
You are the first return guest from Draft Sharks on this show, but I've had Jared Smola, I've had Herms on. That was a very entertaining show. And I've had Alex Korf on as well. Of all four of you guys this year, what player or players is Matt Schauf noticeably higher on than everybody else, or noticeably lower on? Like, what players are you, pounding the table for or against that the other three guys are looking at you like, Matt, you're crazy?
Najee Harris is a big one. I've been trying to move down the rankings. I'm trying to move him down the week 1 rankings. I actually said something to the group amid a busy day today about how he should move down the week 1 rankings, and didn't really get any responses. So I'm going to have to pound the table on that one again tomorrow. Travis Etienne is also a player that I was trying to push down the board earlier in the year, and I think Jared came around on that one a little bit. Funny, like a couple of guys that I was pushing up early were Hayden Hurst and Hunter Henry. And you're like, why are you bothering with those guys? But the best ball drafting makes those people now relevant. If we're getting into a single league, they don't mean as much, but tight end premium, they could also mean a lot. Those are guys that I was on early. I don't know about too many very prominent players that are big disagreements on. One thing with me and Jared, whenever we both do projections, it's not usually huge gaps. There might be like a couple of players, a few players that we have significant differences on, but we tend to be fairly close. And then it's a bit more, arguing just a couple guys here and there. Christian Watson's somebody that I'm not quite as on board with as everybody else, although I do recognize the upside for him. So we'll see. We'll see about Christian Watson. I don't think we'll see about Najee Harris. I think I'm going to be right on that one.
I think you are too. And I hope you are, because do not have him anywhere. DraftSharks.com, the award-winning fantasy football website featuring the award-winning Matt Schauf, at SchaufDS on X, at DraftSharks on X as well. Can you give and we're running out of time here, but can you give the viewers a taste of what subscribers can expect from not only you, but Draft Sharks in general as the season is now underway?
Yeah, I mean, you get all the content. We'll do waiver wire help, trade help, but more, maybe even beyond that, because you can find those things in lots of places. We got tools to help you do it. We've got the free agent finder that you sync your team to it. It will look into your league. It will see exactly who's available to you. So you don't have to ask, who should I pick up? You don't have to read this column that includes a bunch of players that are already, rostered in your league. The tool says this guy's available and he's your best bet. Pick him up. We've got a trade analyzer that does the same thing for trades, looks through your league, finds you a trade partner, helps you evaluate a trade. So we're all about trying to make winning in fantasy easier for you in all the ways that we can.
Matt Schauf joining me tonight on the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. We're going to wrap now. Touchdown for the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes to Rashee Rice, a 1-yard touchdown, just like we all expected tonight. Get out there and enjoy the game. Check out DraftSharks.com. Continue to follow Matt on Twitter at SchaufDS. We will be back next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, there's still time to register for more leagues at myffpc.com. The Main Event Fantasy Pros Championship going off. We'll probably have some Sunday drafts tonight this weekend as well. Matt, thank you so much. Go enjoy the game.
Hey, thank you, man. It's always fun talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget, 10 a.m. Pacific Time, Howard Bender and myself on Saturday. Watch right here on the Better Sports Network.